Okay, good morning. So I mentioned yesterday that we were going to go to the Rebbe's Haggadah to see the Chabad custom on the two cooked items. But there's more, before we get to, there's a little bit more to do um, in the Shulchan Aruch, which we were reading yesterday. So we're going to halacha number 23, Chav Gimel, right there. Yeah, Chav Gimel or 23.
Next page.
So we were discussing yesterday the two cooked, or the Gemara, the Mishnah told us that after we dip our karpas, they set the Seder plate. We learned already that we do it before, but in the times of the Mishnah, they would have brought the table to them after they dipped with the Seder plate set on it. And on the plate, we learned that you have to have two cooked foods. And these two cooked foods, we discussed yesterday what they are.
Meat.
Because the Gemara said you can do anything, really, two cooked vegetables, rice, meat, and gravy. But we learned yesterday that the custom from the Gemara, the Yerushalmi, the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, which says to do a egg and a shank bone. And we learned the reason is because beitza, just egg,
Bechor, no?
in Hebrew, in Aramaic, is beya, which means want, desire. And ziraya, which is shank bone, also means arm. So Hashem wants the outstretched arm. He takes us out of Egypt. And that's the Beitzah and the Zeraya we learned yesterday. That's the idea. We learned also that one of them is to remember the Pesach offering, the carbon Pesach, and one is to remember the Chagiga. And because one is to remember the Pesach offering, it should be cooked the same way the Pesach offering was cooked, which is roasted, not cooked. But we said we're not going to make you crazy to do it exactly the way it was done in the best way with the Pesach offering, where you have a pomegranate stick and you put it, but just roast it. Because in theory, if you roasted the carbon Pesach, it would be kosher anyway, so roast it and that's it. So we roast that shank bone. The egg, the Shulchan Aruch said you can cook it however you want, but our custom is to hard boil. Okay. We also learned that the egg we eat, our custom is to eat it at the Seder by the meal. We eat the egg. The Zeraya, the shank, but we do not eat on purpose.
If we are 12, we put 12 eggs.
Because eating would make it look like you're eating from the carbon Pesach. You're not allowed to eat from the carbon Pesach today, because that would be eating kochim b'chutz, holy meat that's made in a carbon has to be eaten in certain places. Pesach has to be eaten in Yerushalayim, and we're sitting here in Canada. And it would look not good if we ate what looked like the carbon. So we don't eat the shank bone. Okay? Which therefore means if a person forgot to cook it before Yom Tif, then the egg, no problem, you can cook on Yom Tif, because you're going to eat it later. But the shank bone, you can't cook it for the Seder night because you're not eating it. Which means when you cook it, if Yom Tif started already and you have to cook it, you can cook it only if you know you're going to be eating it the next day by daytime, but not for the next Seder, because then that would be cooking from one day to the next. You're not allowed to do that. This is what we learned yesterday. We also learned that the shank bone should have a little bit of meat on it. Otherwise, it's a cooked bone and not a cooked meat. That's considered a cooked food. Okay, that's where we are. Now let's look at halacha Chav Gimel, halacha 23. Yeah, you see it? Im chol Pesach b'motzoi Shabbos. What if Pesach is Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos? Is it this year? What day of the week is it this year? It's not Motzei Shabbos. No, it's not. We had it maybe 2 years ago. We had it where Erev Pesach was on Shabbos. Remember? We had to eat early in the morning on Shabbos, on Friday, on Erev.
Every 7 years, no?
No, not 3 and 7 years. Okay. Anyway, if the first Seder is Motzei Shabbos, the chagiga would have not been offered at that time. Why? Let's explain. Why wouldn't you eat a chagiga? Right? Remember, in the base of Mikdash time, you had two karbanos. You have one, the carbon Pesach, and one is the chagiga, the Yom Tov offering. Yeah, Karban Chagiga offering. So the Chagiga offering and the Pesach offering, both of which would have been eaten at your Seder night. Right? The Karban Pesach you eat at the end of the night, like we eat the matzah at the end of the meal. And your Chagiga would be your main dish, your main course for your main meal. That would be your Chagiga. Okay. But if Pesach is Shabbos, you would not eat the Chagiga at the Seder. Why? He explains. Lefi she'iev shelashachta l'akriva b'Shabbos. You cannot bring the Karban Chagiga on Shabbos. Okay, so let's see. The Seder night. The Seder is Saturday night. You cannot bring the Chagiga all Saturday day because Shabbos. That would be Erev Pesach. Yeah. V'gam yev shelakiva be'erev Shabbos. You can't do it on Friday either.
Well, it's part of Shabbat anyway.
Friday is not part of Shabbos.
Friday night?
You don't bring Karbanos at night. So we're talking about Friday. Friday. You can't bring it on Shabbos because it's Shabbos, which would be Erev Pesach because Pesach is Saturday night. So you can't bring it then. You can't bring it on Friday either. Why? Sharei en nechelas ela l'shnei yomim v'layla echad shebein hashnei yomim. Okay, so let's see. Every Karban has a certain amount of time that you're allowed to eat it. Okay, the Karban Chagiga, you have 2 days and 1 night in between. So if you brought the Karban Chagiga on Monday, you have all of Monday to eat it. You can eat it Monday night, and Tuesday night, no more eating. Okay, so if Pesach is Motzei Shabbos, why not? Let's think. You brought it on, let's say you bring it on Friday. So you have 2 days and 1 night in between. So you can eat it all Friday. You can eat it Friday night. You can eat it Saturday day, but you cannot eat it Saturday night at the Seder. So therefore, you don't even bring it on Friday anyway, because you can't eat it at your Seder. Which means, in the Beis Hamikdash time, when Pesach was Motzei Shabbos, no Chagiga. Karban Pesach, yes, but no Chagiga. Okay, so now the question becomes, if there's no Chagiga on Saturday night, then what's the point of having the egg? The egg is to remember the Chagiga. And on Saturday night, there would be no Chagiga in the Beis Hamikdash time. So maybe you shouldn't have an egg. Says the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch. Nevertheless, you still should bring 2 cooked items and put it on your Seder plate. One to remember the Pesach, and one to remember the Chagiga offering, even though if it was Saturday night, you wouldn't even have a Chagiga, but still put it there. Why? It's not as if we're putting the actual Karban there. It's just to remember. So remember it on Saturday night anyway. Even if it were Saturday night in the times of Beis Hamikdash, you wouldn't be eating Chagiga, but it's okay to remember it on Saturday night. Follow? If it was an actual Chagiga, no Chagiga on Saturday night. But because it's anyways only to remember, might as well put it there anyway. So even though it's Saturday night, and if it were Beis Hamikdash time, you wouldn't have a Chagiga, you should still have your egg there. Yeah, that's what he's saying. And therefore, ein lachush. It's not such a big deal. If the Chagiga offering wasn't eaten on this night in the temple times. All right? Moreover, adraba, hamedaktik bazeh, if someone were to always have an egg, but then when the Seder was Saturday night, he didn't have an egg, what would it look like? It would look like he's treating his egg as if it were an actual Karban. Because when it's on not Saturday, he's having it. When it is Saturday, he's not having it because it makes as if he's actually treating it like a Karban. So better to have the egg on Saturday night, even though we wouldn't have eaten the Chagiga, because that way it's showing I'm not treating it like an actual Karban, I'm just remembering. So why not remember on Saturday night? Yeah? Okay, halacha chadalit. So what do we learn so far? That you have to have, before you start your Haggadah, you have to have your matzah, because you have to recite the Haggadah when you have with the matzah in front of you. You have to have morar, because you have to recite the Haggadah with the morar in front of you. You have to have 2 cooked items, egg and the shank bone, to remember the 2 karbanos, which is basically your entire Seder plate. Oh, and you have to have the chareses, the dip, because that remembers the mortar. Okay, so you have your whole Seder plate there. But we didn't tell you what the order to set it up in is. He just said to have them all on your plate. But what's the order? Where do you put which item? So we already have a Haggadah which tells us what to do. But let's find out why. Yeah? Okay. Chavdalit, 24. Kol hadvarim ha'elu. All of these things we talked about. Tahainu, meaning, hamatzah is the matzah. Hamarar the marar. Hacharoises, the dip. The charoises dip. Ushnei tavshilin, and the two cooked items, the egg and the shank bone. Ein sorach lahavi ella lefnei misha omer Haggadah. They only have to be brought in front of the person who's actually saying the Haggadah. Tahainu, that means lefnei balabayis, at the leader of the household. That's where they have to have the Seder plate. Right? This is something we'll get to soon in the Gemara. But the rest of the people around the Seder table who aren't saying the Haggadah themselves, they are only listening to the person, the reader, and they're fulfilling their obligation by listening. This is not our custom. Our custom is that everybody says it themselves. But just like Kiddush, where one person can make Kiddush, everybody else listens, and by them listening, they fulfill their obligation for Kiddush, the same thing could happen for the Seder night. One person can read the Haggadah, and everybody else listens and fulfill their obligation. And that's the way it used to be. And he continues in the parentheses, Shekei nochan lasos. That's even the right way to do it. Mishum b'roiv hadras melech, because the pasuk says it's more glorious to Hashem, it's more glorious to the king when there's a lot of people. So doing it all together makes it more special, right? Commotion is bar b'siman ches, as explained elsewhere. Okay. So ein sarich sheyiyu devarim elu lefneim, and therefore, if the Seder was set up where only one person is reading the Haggadah at the head of the table, everybody else is listening, then there's no reason for everybody to have their own kaira. Just one guy have his kaira, right? Loi b'shas shmiyas Haggadah. They don't need it while they're listening to the reader read. Loi b'shas hasodan. They don't even need it during the meal. Because the leader will have his kaira. He'll have enough matzah for everyone. He'll have enough maror for everyone, and he can deliver it when everybody needs it. He'll distribute it when everybody needs. Right? Even on a regular Yom Tif, Sarech Liftzoya Alechem Mishnah, you have to have 2 loaves of bread on a regular Yom Tif for Shabbos. So by the Seder night also you have 2 matzahs, we make the bracha on. On a regular Yom Tif. Everybody has to have 2 challahs by them to make the hamotzi. Everybody has to have their own 2 challahs. Yeah? In your place, everybody has 2 challahs. Don't have to. Only the leader has 2 challahs. He makes hamotzi and gives everybody a piece. So same thing is Seder night. The leader has his matzahs in front of him. He has his kaira, and then he leads it. Everybody else listens, and he distributes it. Right? Again, our custom, of course, is that everybody makes their own kiddush, and everybody recites their own Haggadah, and therefore the custom is everybody has their own kaira. But at least technically speaking, one does not need to do that. When we get to the Rebbe's Haggadah, we'll see more about this.
Isn't the leader supposed to be telling the story?
That's right.
Why is everybody telling the story?
Sorry?
There should be people listening.
Yeah, so,
They
okay.
shouldn't be saying it all.
Say again?
Everybody's talking at the same time. Nobody's understanding what's going on.
Yeah, but nonetheless, that's mine. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Nonetheless, our custom is that everybody says it themselves. See, it's a similar thing to Kiddush. So Kiddush, right, in Sephardic homes, actually, they specifically only have the leader make Kiddush. Nobody else makes Kiddush. Mm-hmm. Why? For this principle. The Rav Am Hadas Melech. It's more beautiful when they do it together. So one person says Kiddush, everybody else says Amen, and nobody else makes Kiddush. In Ashkenazi homes, and even in Hasidic homes, everybody makes their own Kiddush. Why? Because it's a different principle. One principle is, like we just said, Rav Am Hadas Melech. The more people do it together, the more beautiful it is. So everybody should listen to one Kiddush and say Amen. And that's it. Only one person make Kiddush, everybody else listen. The other principle is mitzvah bo yoter mibushlucha. It's better a mitzvah for you to do it yourself than to have someone else do it for you. So for example, when I'm getting married, right? So I can make a messenger, I can give someone the ring and say, you give it to her and tell her that this is for her kiddushin on my behalf. Al pi halacha, that's okay. But the halacha, it's okay because he's my messenger, it's fine. Same thing with other mitzvahs. I can have a shliach. Not all mitzvahs. For example, I can't make someone else a messenger to put on tefillin for me. That's a mitzvah baguf. It's a mitzvah on my body, on my person, that I have to put on tefillin. But there are other mitzvahs which I can make someone else a messenger to do it on my behalf. Tzedakah. I can give someone the money and say, you give it to someone else. All kinds of mitzvahs like that, where I can send someone else to do it for me. And the same thing with Kiddush. You're doing it on my behalf, and I'm just saying, Amen. But there's a principle, mitzvah boy. It's a bigger mitzvah for me to do it myself than have someone else do it for you. So therefore, should I make my own Kiddush now? Yes. Even though I'm listening to someone else, I want to make my own Kiddush. So the same thing with the Haggadah. Even though, yes, there is the principle, like we're learning here, that to have the whole community do it together is beautiful. And the more people do it together, the nicer it is. And if only one person should say, everybody else listen. Nonetheless, there's the other value where each person does it themselves. So some do one way, where they take the value of everybody doing it together. And some people take the value of each person doing it on their own. But here we're learning from the Shulchan Aruch, at least the old way, or many communities still is the way, where one person reads, everybody else listens. Our custom is everybody reads the Haggadah themselves, and therefore it's also our custom, at least in many houses, where everybody has their own KAARAH. But at least as we're learning from the Shulchan Aruch, I think in Sephardic homes like that. It's only one KAARAH on the table, right? Only one KAARAH for the leader. I think in many homes like that. And everybody else just listens, and then he takes from his matzah and gives everybody matzah, gives everybody maror, like he's describing here in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Now continues, halacha 25. V'nohagu, the custom is, lahavi to kol hadvarim elu, to bring all of these things, the whole KAARAH, the matzah, the maror, the charoises, the two cooked items, the egg and the zraya. 25. Lefnei balabayis, before the leader. Miyad achar kiddush, right after kiddush. Koidem achilas hayiraka, is before eating the vegetables. Okay, now this is interesting. Let's look at footnote 146. Okay. Now, here's the interesting thing. Our Mishnah on page 114 in the Gemara seemed to imply that first you dip and then you bring the rest of the Seder plate, which means you would bring the Seder plate after Karpas. But here he's telling us to bring it after Kiddush before Karpas. And remember, we already learned that our custom is to set the Seder plate before Kiddush. But we're going to the Gemara's time where they would bring the table set before you, yes? So which means not like we do where we set the KAARAH before Kiddush. This is after Kiddush. They would bring the table. Okay, so when to bring it? Before Karpas or after Karpas? So in our Gemara, it seems like first Karpas, and then they would bring the Seder plate. But here the Alter is telling us to actually bring it before Karpas. So let's see footnote 146. Rabbi Hananel derives this concept from the wording of the Mishnah, Psachim 114a, our Mishnah. That source states that the matzahs and the items for the Seder plate should be brought before the person reciting the Haggadah. It then states he should dip, meaning the person leading the Seder should dip the vegetables immediately after the Seder plate is placed before him. So he sees it in such an order where first you're bringing the Seder plate and then dipping, not dipping and then order Seder plate. Let's see our Gemara quickly. It's 114a, so give me 1 second, I'm going to look it up. We have it on the side here. Yes. So right, this was the question. The Mishnah says they bring before him, and then he dips the chazeres. So he does the dip. What did they bring before him? So remember, we learned there's two opinions. Rashbam said you bring the vegetable, which means you bring only the dipping vegetable, and then they bring the rest of the plate. But Rabbi Hananel says you bring the plate, and then he dips, which means the whole Seder plate, according to Rabbi Hananel, is brought before dipping, not after dipping. And that is the way the Alter Rebbe puts it in the Shulchan Aruch. But again, our custom is to set the table before Kiddush anyway. Okay, let's continue. Back to the Shulchan Aruch on Halacha Chaf Hey. Now we're back to the main text. So in the parentheses, they bring the Kiddush, the Seder plate right away, so that way your Kiddush goes right to your meal. Okay. Well, continuing on 25, the second paragraph, halacha 25. After you eat the vegetables, that is, after you do karpas, dipping, you can remove off the table anything left over. So the salt water that you use to dip the karpas, you can take it off. And if you have leftover karpas, leftover vegetables, you can take that off also. Okay. Now, I want to do a halacha today. Okay, let's start. Let's see how far we go. Chavav, the next page. Chavav. So now we said before, what order? How do you set them up on your Seder plate? Yeah. So we know what you have to have here. You have to have the matzah. You have to have the vegetable for dipping. You have to have your karpas. You have to have the maror. Right. You have to have your matzah maror and your charosis, your mixture, because all that is to remember what was the matzah, the maror, and the dip, and that's we have to have all that while you're reciting the Haggadah, and you have to have the two cooked items to remember the korban Pesach and the korban Chagiga. But how do you set them up on your plate? What's the order, right? There's different customs actually as to how you order them, but let's see. Here's the principle. When they bring before you all the vegetable, and all the other things that come along with it, the matzah, the maror, the charos, all the different things that you set up. How do you set them up? It's good to organize them, lefantov in front of you, bekaira on a plate, the inyan in such a way that you won't have to pass over mitzvahs. Let's explain. Let's use your example, your talis and tefillin. Every morning you have talis and tefillin. Which one do you put on first, talis or tefillin? Talis first. So because you put on talis first, right, you have to set your talis bag up. Then when you put your hand in, the first thing you touch is your talis. Because if you put your tefillin first, you'd be passing over a mitzvah to get to another one. That's not respectful. So you want to set up your talis bag in such a way that you're first taking out the talis, that's the first mitzvah you're doing. And then the tefillin. Right? The same thing, by the way, with the shel rosh and the shel yad in your talis tefillin bag. Which one do you put on first, the hand or the head? Hand goes first. Which is why in your bag, you have to put your hand tefillin on the left and your head tefillin on the right. Why? Because when you extend your hand, your right hand, your hand automatically goes leftwards because your hand always goes in. So if you're putting your left hand out, it'll go to your right. If you're putting your right hand out, it'll go to your left. So because your right hand goes to your left, therefore you should put your hand tefillin on the left, so that way it touches that one first, so you don't skip over the mitzvah.
That's right.
Okay, so now the same thing's going to be with your Seder plate. You want to set it up in such a way that it's going to be in the order of what you're doing. So if you put your karpas in the back of your Seder plate, then you're skipping over the maror to get to your karpas. That's not nice. So you got to put your karpas closer to you because that's going to be first. So you set your Seder plate up in such a way that whatever you're using first is closest to you. So you never pass over a mitzvah to get to the other mitzvah. Follow? So let's just put your talis closer to you so you don't pass over your tefillin to get to your talis. Yes? Let's see. So again, toiv, it's good. She is sadden that you organize them, the fun of in front of you, bekaira on a plate, the inyan in such a way, that you won't have to pass over any mitzvahs. The hainu meaning to say, the vegetables, that's going to be first. The karpas is first. The parsley, the potato, or the onion, whatever you're using. You smuchim lo yosim in a matzah. Should be closer to him than the matzah, because he's not eating the matzah only till after he finishes the Haggadah. The karpas is before. So make sure it's on top, so it's closest to you. Right? V'hamatzah min hamaror v'charoises. And the matzah should be closer to you than the maror and the charoises. Because you eat matzah before you eat maror. Right? You have magid, moitzi, matzah, and then maror. So your matzah's got to be closer to you than your maror. And the maror and charoises should be closer to you than the two cooked items, because the two cooked items you never eat. The egg you eat by the meal, which is last. But if you put the two cooked items in front and the maror in back, then you'd be passing over the two cooked items. There's already the base to get to the maror. Don't do that. Put the maror closer, which is what we do. Our KAARAH is set like that. The vegetable is closest to you, the maror, and then the two cooked items, the egg and the zera, at the back on the top of the plate. And under it, there's the matzah. We do under the matzah. We'll talk about that in a second. But even so, because it's under, it's still closer to you than the maror is, right? Because if your matzah starts here, your maror is only over here, or this way. If this is the beginning of your matzah, your maror is here, and then your two cooked items are back here. So it's ordered like that. It's ordered, and what you're going to be using first is closest to you. Okay, we'll stop over here. God willing, tomorrow we'll finish this halacha 26. We'll learn more about the order of how the Seder plate should be set up, and then we'll get to the Rebbe's Haggadah about everything we just learned, about the Zroya, the Beitza, where it's set up, and how it's set up, and what items we use. That's going to do tomorrow, God willing. Have a good day, Yidden.
This is